Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. What a wonderful way to start today's webinar. Smart grids are a critical tenet with the digitalization pillar of PLN's new paradigm. The opening interview, which we will be showing shortly, is going to take a deep dive into PLN's smart grid strategy, and how the implementation of smart grids across Indonesia will facilitate the transition to renewable energy, while also helping to ensure a more reliable supply of power to a country plagued by blackouts and needing to drive economic growth, as I think most countries are at this point. Today, our conversation will focus on PLN's technology roadmap and where the company expects to see the greatest gains from smart grid implementation. After that, we're going to move on to a panel discussion featuring PLN and regional and international stakeholders. We'll explore the lessons learned in smart grid implementations globally and how effectively managing the data gathered can make or break the achievements of a significant ROI on smart grid investment. Our panel will also explore how smart grids and renewable energy come together and facilitate the transition to a cleaner energy future. We're privileged today to speak to Pak Haryanto, who is the Director of Java, Bali and Madura region from PLN. And I had the opportunity to speak with him on Monday about the company's smart grid strategy. And we'll be sharing that video with you shortly before moving on to the live discussion part of today's program. Today, we are joined by Dr. Iskandar, who is the IPU Rector for the Institute of Technology for Indonesia and a member of the expert group for MKI. Dr. Zainal Arifin, who is the Vice Director for Strategic Utilities and EV for MKI, and Charlie Richardson, who's the Utilities Lead for APAC from Accenture. Now, before we move on to the interview, I do have a few housekeeping issues that I would like to just cover. First of all, today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session on the Smart Energy International website, and it is accessible through the link that you're using to access this webinar today. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. So if you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to send through your questions via the Ask Staff a Question box on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be answering questions during today's session, but please note if we don't get to your question today, we will follow up afterwards. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the video presentation that I did with Pak Haryanto earlier this week. Pak Haryanto, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I really do appreciate it. So if I may, I know that PLN have got a fairly comprehensive smart grid strategy in place. And I was wondering if you could give me an idea, what are the most pressing challenges you plan to address with your smart grid strategy?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Firstly, as you know, Indonesia is an archipelago country. This country consists more than 10,000 islands. Yeah, so to roll out the smart grid needs actually high cost and investment. And secondly, we have still challenges in human capital readiness and research. And then actually smart grid needs supportive government regulation and standard to accelerate its implementations. Yeah, besides aforementioned changes, along with energy transition, you know that we have some challenging issues. This is the global trends. We call it 3D, decarbonization, digitalization, and decentralization, which potentially change, even disrupt our existing business. We believe that we need smart grid to deal with those issues in order to survive during transition and stay sustained in the future. Therefore, we put smart grid to align with PLN objectives to increase reliability and efficiency, reduce losses, and enhance productivity and sustainability. Thank you.
How do you plan on addressing these people, process, technology?
Yeah, this is important issues. For people, for example, now we still continue to build the capability of PLN young engineers to study smart grid topics and also all related areas. We also have collaboration with the utility, for example, TNB, EGAT, university, and other stakeholders to prepare our human capital, yeah, especially for the smart grid, but also to face other challenging issues. For the process, in 2020, aligned with the National Strategic Program from the government, PLN will implement first stage of smart grid in my region, actually. But beside this, PLN also has been implementing smart grid in small islands in Indonesia, mostly in eastern of Indonesia, by introducing hybrid system. That means we combine existing diesel generators and renewable power plant, especially solar PV. And then for the technology, yeah, we carry out this program step by step, actually. For years to come, PLN is looking forward to implement AMI, and then also the automatic distribution system, and then electric vehicle microgrids in distribution system. But also we introduce also power plant and gas turbine power plant. We implement also digitalization, yeah, and then for the transmission system operation, PLN a chance to implement artificial intelligence in system operation, and we will also introduce, we will upgrade our control center as an advanced control center, especially in Java, Bali region. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Now, what kind of level of investment do you anticipate needing? And have you quantified the return on that investment?
Yeah, basically smart grid is a huge concept. This need also huge investment. We open collaboration to implement it for certain application. For example, for the electric vehicle infrastructure, since last year we developed it by 2 ways. We call it COCO, company owned, company operate. That means PLN built this charging station, and POPO, partner owned, partner operates. That means the investor will invest money for the charging station and they operate. We collaborate also as much as possible with the other institutions, just like IEA, International Energy Agency, and then USAID. They bring to Indonesia CAISO, Californian system operator, and then ADB and some other to develop smart grid in PLN. You know that our Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources also supported to PLN. Yeah, you know that as I mentioned before that in 2020, Java Island has been approved as one of national strategic program by the government. And of course, as an investment activity, we make actually feasibility study first before implementation. And yeah, it means we consider also the financial aspect. Thank you.
And is there currently a smart grid roadmap in place?
Yeah, unfortunately nowadays we still ongoing to establish the PLN smart grid roadmap. Hopefully will be finished this year. But however, we have put smart grid initiative on 10 years master planning. We still have 2019 and 2000 until 2028 PLN programs. And this is in line with the roadmap of government smart grid program from 2020 to 2024. Thank you.
If I may ask, what are the challenges to its implementation?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, that the smart grid is a huge concept. That means it's not too easy to implement smart grid. So the main issue arises related to the coordination and investment costs. We know that it is not only about technology, but also policy regarding the grid operation. For example, we cannot to implement demand response if the electricity tariff is not dynamic yet. You know that in Indonesia still a regulated tariff. And if the tariff is still rigid and flat, you know that's the role of other parties instead of utility company to strengthen the grid will be less effective. And then this is the important issue also is the unclear of smart grid benefit for the utility actually. And then as you know, as I mentioned before, that the impact of COVID-19 is very hard to my company. And you know that slow down almost every sector and business, including our existing smart grid projects. So yeah, affording operational and investment costs of smart grid projects become challenging. Thank you.
If I may ask, what type of ICT and communication technologies do you anticipate will support the rollout?
Yeah, we know that ICT and communication are very important to implement the smart grid. And fortunately, PLN already had ITMP, Information Technology Master Plan, and it covers all supply chain of the electricity business process from generation until to customer. And we know that we have several options, just like PLC, radio frequency, GPRS, and also optical cable with the latest technology. PLN actually has subsidiary, we call it Icon Plus, which is focused on IT and communication solution provider to provide and develop communication network for PLN through optimization of transmission and distribution network asset. So it is very important to us that the contribution of Icon to help and to support the PLN to implement the smart grid in the future. Thank you.
I actually had the pleasure of meeting one of your colleagues from Icon Plus the other day.
So yeah, okay.
Speaking of which, how will you protect your cyber assets, you know, with all this interconnectedness?
Yeah, you know that is always struggling for us regarding the cyber attack. But we have some security system and protocols for overcoming the cybersecurity issue. And then now we still separate system of IT and operation technology like SCADA and protection to ensure mission critical and operation system high class queue. And we also intensively work with other government agency, just like National Cybersecurity Agency and Ministry of Information to anticipate the cyber threat of our grid. Thank you.
If I can change direction just a little bit and ask, how do you anticipate the smart grid will facilitate the integration of distributed energy resources into the grid?
Yeah, we know that one of the main function of smart grid is to make the grid more flexible for integrating with the all type of power sources like variable renewable energy, energy storage, and distributed power generation. SG smart grid applications like energy management system and ADS, automatic distribution system, are able to assist the grid to connect with distributed energy resources such as PV solar, PV rooftop, and small micro turbine. And also smart grid implementation is high voltage power system operation in high voltage power generation by utilizing advanced control center could improve the feasibility and reliability of system operation. Thank you.
Given the topographical variations of Indonesia, how are you going to prioritize the rollout of the smart grid across PLN's very large area?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, Indonesia is archipelago country. We have more than 10,000 islands. Actually, we have 3 existing grid systems. For the big islands, for example, Java, Sumatra, we have high voltage grid system, 150 kV, 500 kV system. But we still also medium voltage grid for the medium islands, and also low voltage or off grid for the small islands. Yeah, for high voltage grid, our concern is to increase reliability and resiliency. And then for medium voltage, we focus to reduce losses and increase efficiency. Then for low voltage or off grids, mostly in a small island in eastern part of Indonesia, our main objective is to reduce the electricity cost production. Yeah, because the investment cost is very huge. Yeah, until now, PLN will prioritize smart grid implementation in small system or isolated system, which mostly located in eastern island of Indonesia. So by roll out the smart grid might decreases the cost of production for this small island. Thank you.
Pak Haryanto, if I could ask, how does energy storage feed into this plan?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we put energy storage, especially battery energy storage system, for many use cases. The first battery energy storage system is used for dealing with the intermittency of variable renewable energy. And then in the future, PLN also would like to see any possibility of energy storage application as a black start unit to improve power system restoration after blackout. Battery energy storage system implementation also could reduce electricity cost production by combining it with PV solar and the existing diesel in a small island. And we can also implement this for the demand side management, such as load shifting and peak saving. The other hand, for years to come, PLN also in progress to build pump storage. The big pump storage, we call it upper Cisokan. It's around 1,000 megawatt capacity in Java, west part of Java, which potentially assists PLN in dealing with the high penetration of variable energy and renewable energy in the future. Yeah, we hope that with the building of the pump storage energy, we can dealing with the new trend, the high penetration of variable renewable energy. Thank you very much.
Pak Haryanto, thank you so much for making the time to speak with us today. I really do appreciate it. And I hope that we will have the opportunity to speak with you again soon. With us today,
You're
I really do
welcome. Thank you very
appreciate
much.
it.
And we
And
have
I hope that
opportunity
we
to
will have
meet
the
and to
opportunity
discuss
to speak
more
with you
deeply
again soon.
regarding the smart grid issue. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'd like
Thank
that
you very
very
much.
much.
And
Bye-bye.
we have opportunity.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, a really interesting discussion with Pak Haryanto, and I hope that you have found that a little bit enlightening and that you've taken some of the information that we shared with, or that he shared with us this week, and that will at least form the basis of some of your questions going forward. Now, again, on behalf of Enlit Asia, PLN and MKI, I would like to welcome you to today's session. Thank you to the session sponsor, Accenture, and to PLN for sponsoring this entire series. A reminder, today's webinar is available on demand. And please don't forget, we'd really love to hear from you during today's presentation. So if you have any questions, please use the Ask Staff a Question box. Dr. Arifin, I am going to start with you. And the question I want to pose to you really is, what is the most pressing need for smart grids in Indonesia?
Yeah, actually, along with the energy transition right now, so the Indonesia government already had commitment to reduce CO2 emission reduction, yeah, to reduce the CO2 emission and the significant number. So I think the main driver of smart grid in PLN especially is increasing the renewable energy for dealing with the CO2 emission reduction. Because we already commit in 2025, we should increase our contribution of renewable energy up to 23%. So for dealing with the the flexibility, for dealing with the grid integration to the variable renewable energy to make our grid is more flexible, I think smart grid is needed for that.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Iskandar, from your perspective, why is the smart grid so important for Indonesia?
Yes, thank you, Claire, and good afternoon, all the participants. I think the most pressing need for smart grid in Indonesia is the dynamic price, as stated also by Pak Haryanto, that we need to set the dynamic price at a certain time of a certain location, subject to reliability, power quality, as well as penetration of renewable energy. So I will call this the best electricity dynamic price. The dynamic electricity price is not set by the government regulation, as currently practiced by our electricity price, but based on the results of two-way communication between independent power producers, PLN, and users. So I think the new way of calculating the price of electricity. Smart grids application empowers the usage of renewable energy resources and helping power generation companies to reduce operational costs. The consumers can also use this system to maintain their consumption, further enabling them to reduce their electricity bills. Furthermore, electricity prices in the industrial and service sectors will increase the competitiveness of their products. So finally, and of course, as the consequence, the state benefits from an increase of tax revenues from various productive sectors that are growing and developing in Indonesia. So I think this is the what the most pressing needs for smart grids in Indonesia.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Richardson, perhaps you could give us an idea, I guess, from perhaps a greater or a wider APAC perspective around the most pressing needs for smart grids.
You're still muted.
Speaking on mute.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Yes, there you go.
So really, there's two key things that we think are key to enabling smart grids across Asia Pacific and really the rest of the world. And it's two things. It's one, a recognition of concurrent events and no longer just weather, and two, a shift from reliability to a focus on resilience. Those are different concepts and still nascent somewhat in the industry. So I'll try to talk a little bit more about those with the next couple of minutes. We can advance to the next slide. So we've got a little bit of a lag in here. So just quickly, what we're going to be talking about is focused out of our digitally enabled grid research. So this has been about 6 years of longitudinal research with the utilities around the world. If we can go ahead and go on to the next slide. So I don't need to tell this audience weather events, the frequency, the duration, the severity of weather impacting or weather events impacting network is increasing significantly all over the world. If we move on to the next slide, but what we're finding is that those events are not only increasing in frequency, but the severity and the duration of them is extending as well. So what we found over in our research is that 87% of executives clearly recognize that this has gotten more severe in the last 10 years. Expectation is it's only going to get worse in the next 10 years. But really interestingly, less than a quarter actually believe they're prepared for it, which is alarming, right? So we see the problem coming, but we don't necessarily have the resolution for it. We move on to the next slide. So what we're really facing now is a potential for 3 concurrent events. So my speakers before me have definitely touched on these individually, and I'll try to speak to them collectively. But we've historically focused on weather-related events and how do we prepare for those with a level of seasonality. We're now facing 3 different threats. The first one being traditional weather and how those and the nature of the changes in those events, like I said, frequency, duration, and intensity. The second one is cyber attack. We're finding in our security practices that we're finding cyber attack is near constant. And I think all of us would say that we see the events happening, unfolding around the world, and we probably within our own organizations get the security reports that talk about cyber attack happening all of the time, and then it just simply spikes as new entrants jump into the fray, or as they particularly find a weakness. And then the third one, and the unfortunate one really discovered this year, is pandemic. Pandemic impacts everything from how do you maintain the network, how do you maintain service, how do you interact with one another, your interruptions to supply chain, etc. And whereas we've traditionally modeled for reliability looking at seasonality and weather events, we now have to start to look at and model for concurrent events. All three of these happening simultaneously: a pandemic, a severe weather event, and cyber attack, which is honestly quite alarming and is going to require a level of computational power and a level of investment in technology and in the community that we haven't traditionally had in order to be able to combat these and deliver the reliability and the electricity that all of our customers and our businesses need. If we move on to the next slide. So what we're really talking about is pivoting from something focused on reliability, which has been our traditional metric, and moving to focusing on resilience. So this is really difficult to pin down because resiliency hasn't necessarily been defined. Reliability is and will remain critical, and it's well known to us. It's repairing lines or poles, upgrading electrical equipment, training, rolling out workforce. It's a fundamental capability that we have ingrained in our DNA. But there is no standard definition of resiliency, which makes it really, really difficult. And it's one of the key things that we think organizations need to work on initially, is just to define what resilience means for them. They also need to define that because that influences the regulatory relationship, the ratepayer relationship, and any business cases that need to be made for investment in smart grid infrastructure. We define resilience as the ability to the network to absorb extreme disruptions, adapt to and maintain power delivery where possible, and restore lost connections safely and efficiently. And resilience is really going to demand a more strategic approach, one that readies the organization to bounce back quickly from major and multiple and concurrent events, and makes the case to stakeholders for proactive investment and maintenance. And then if I jump to my last slide here, I promise the last one. So really what we're seeing is three strategic imperatives to improving resilience. One is establishing the foundation of resilience, and that means making it a C-level priority, articulating a vision and policies, increasing and deepening the dialogue with customers, governments, regulators, defining resilience like we talked about, and then having forward-looking metrics for resilience. So defining a new catalog of metrics and KPIs that determine how resilient you believe your network to be. And then doing cost-benefit analysis, et cetera, which is really around that robust quantitative analysis. The second point is about building the resilient network. So this is where we're talking about a lot of investment in the actual smart grid itself. So resolving limited network visibility and distribution around asset operating data, new network analysis capabilities. So this is really about that digital twin concept, and how do you establish a digital twin that can be evaluated and have thousands of permutations run through it, so that the modeling can be done in such a way to prepare for those concurrent events. And then resolving technical requirements for new flexibility solutions. So for great reference to electric vehicles, distributed generation, microgrids, making sure we build the network to incorporate those. And then having a really flexible optimization of restoration tactics. So that could mean even shared workforce with other organizations. We're already starting to see conversations with other organizations that have supply chain and or field force that could potentially support network resiliency. And then the last one is about exploring the emerging resilient services. So essentially there's a no-tech solution here too, which is really about how do you talk to your end consumers, your end businesses, and involve them in the resiliency conversation. What sacrifices can they make? What investments do they have that can be leveraged, whether that be solar in their home, batteries in their basement, their EV, whatever it may be, or their just ability to curtail their consumption. They can be a part of the solution and should be. And while we've had a lot of these types of programs to prevent rolling brownouts and blackouts around the world, they've had limited efficacy because generally we don't engage with customers from a network side on a regular basis. So there's a real need to look at that as a low cost option and looking at it as a community effort. There's a real sense of we're all in this together and that each of us has a part to play. And if anything, in the current environment, we've learned where we all feel a bit powerless, whatever contribution we can make. And if that's a contribution to keeping the lights on for myself and for my neighbor, most people are willing to and gladly will make that sacrifice.
Sorry, this whole you're on mute thing is always a little bit problematic. Thank you so much for that. You actually raised a couple of fairly important questions, and I'd like to pose a question, if I may, to you, Mr. Richardson, and then to you, Dr. Arifin, and that is really one of the things that was raised both in the interview and by yourself, Mr. Richardson, was really the idea of the business case for smart grids. So, Mr. Richardson, perhaps you could just expand on that a little bit and just share some of your thoughts on that particular question.
I think all of us on this call, and definitely Dr. Arifin will probably attest, the ROI, developing a business case for these is always a challenge. We see it in every country in the world. I'm speaking to you from Melbourne, Australia, and I've watched a smart meter rollout that's been both state-led and one that's been customer-led, and both have seen significant challenges in the ROI. And determining who pays for it and when and how is a really, really difficult question to answer. I know I can speak to, if I talk about Victoria in Australia, where there was a state-mandated rollout of smart meters, the promise and the payment, the promise of benefit was largely given to customers. The payment, the subsidization of this was done by end customers too, but the vast majority of the benefit has been realized by retailers and network companies. So not necessarily that it was a bad thing that was done, it's just that the promise of it and the ROI that was given to end consumers didn't align with the actual reality of the situation. And you've seen a pivot away from that in the rest of Australia, where you've seen consumer-led rollouts as opposed to state-mandated. But who subsidizes that and what promises are being made on the back end are really critical, because there's still, I think, even years on, there's still some pushback as to why that investment was made and why consumers were stuck with the bill.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think often the more immediate benefit accrues to utilities, but ultimately that would accrue to consumers as well. I guess perhaps it's just that the period for that return is a little bit longer than they'd been, expected to anticipate. Dr. Arifin, from your perspective, the business case for smart grids. I mean, Indonesia is a very diverse country. How do you anticipate this working out from a business case perspective?
Yeah, actually we have already done with several pilot projects, and right now we come out with the conclusion that we have some promising business case of smart grid. The first thing I think is the smart microgrid. It's dealing with the how we electrifying the small scattered island. We still struggle to produce electricity with the affordable price. So we just start with the four pilot project actually, which is already the commercial project with the smart microgrid at the 4 locations. This funding by ADB, and some of the project is maybe just finished last month. Yeah, so we already done with some feasibility study. For example, in one island in Bali, the Nusa Penida Island, the smart microgrid in form of hybrid we combine the existing diesel with the PV solar with the battery. Within average capacity is about 10 megawatt like that. We have some cost saving because the smart microgrid, of course, will use the such energy management system to optimize the system. We have the cost saving. We can reduce the electricity cost production until at least 30%. And because we can reduce the fuel oil consumption, at the same time, we can increase the penetration of renewable energy. The business case right now is still EPC. It means the project is fund owned by PLN. But in the future, I believe that the business case of smart grid in form of smart microgrid will be very promising for all parties there. We have identified at least 59 locations, which is potentially to be smart microgrid in Indonesia. The capacity about 1 gigawatt is a huge number, I think. And we did with simulation that the financial aspect, like in PV, ERR, is very promising. So I think, as I already mentioned with our director, we open for the collaboration. I mean, maybe it's not directly will fund by PLN itself, but we open for all party who want to join to develop the smart microgrid in Indonesia. And also ada smart grid project like AMI. Yeah, we now still on preparation for the proof of concept, but actually we want to start soon as possible. Yeah, but you know the pandemic is slow down everything, so the MI advanced metering infrastructure actually should start this year for at least 1 million customer, but everything is slowed down right now. Maybe we can start again in the next year. And we have some options, some not only by PLN itself, but within some business model scenario. And within this business model, I think smart grid will be profitable for all.
Thank you very much. So I really appreciate that insight. Dr. Iskander, I'm going to shift over to you a little bit, and I'd like to explore the idea of the development of a smart grid roadmap. What, from your perspective, is the most important consideration for that development?
Well, I believe that in developing of a smart grid roadmap, we should develop a roadmap that is realistic and can be implemented immediately. I agree with Dr. Arifin. Starting with smart microgrid is, I think, the good choice, yeah, to start. And as we have also have been working on this smart microgrid pilot projects in several locations in Indonesia. And in fact, I am the initiator for the first smart grid in Sumba Island, eastern part of Indonesia, with cooperation with the PLN. So I think this to start the implementation of smart grid, starting with smart microgrid, is, I think, it's a good way to start with. But we have also looked at another alternative that can be taken to start the development of existing prosumer. As we all know that PLN has been actually introduced the willingness of PLNs to buy energy from the rooftop of photovoltaic. Yeah, so PLN, I think starting from last year or 2 years ago, that PLN willingness to buy energy produced from the rooftop photovoltaic, even though at the price of only 65% of the electricity rate. Yeah. This regulation on prices needs to be improved. Yeah. Not I think is too cheap. Yeah, 65% of the electricity rates. To make it more attractive, for example, the price the same or slightly lower than the electricity tariff. Furthermore, is this individual prosumer practice that has been practiced by PLN can be expanded to community prosumers. Community prosumers, and also maybe expanded for to captive power owners, including industry and business, as well as power plant business permit holders and others. Another thing that needs attention is promoting the microgrid system through a pilot project, as mentioned by Dr. Arifin, in collaboration with institutions that also developing the similar projects such as my office, BPPT. And last but not least, facilities that require large power, high reliability, and high quality, such as airports, industrial estates, and so on, are given the opportunity to build smart microgrids. I think with this, the roadmap will be smoothly can be smoothly implemented.
I guess the makeup of Indonesia makes the development of a smart grid roadmap somewhat different to in other places. There are very few countries that are as scattered geographically, and that of course does make it incredibly difficult to have a one size fits all kind of roadmap. Mr. Richardson, perhaps you could comment on the important elements of the roadmap.
So I think it's a couple of things. One, it's the recognition of electricity as a growing dependency upon electricity across all consumers and all markets in the world. We're quickly moving towards electrification of transport. Dr. Iskander and Dr. Arifin have talked to DER, solar and storage, and especially when you've got a lot of distinct microgrids, island, literal and figurative island microgrids, it becomes really important to recognize to emphasize the importance of electricity in everyone's life. We're now talking about not just someone being able to, or someone not being able to turn on the lights or being able to heat or cool their home, but now they actually can't get from point A to point B. The economic impacts are even more severe, so it becomes even more important. And then I think number two on that is recognizing that importance is what I talked about earlier, which is defining resilience. So defining resilience and assigning metrics around it, giving it a set of KPIs that are relevant and appropriate. So that differs, as you said, for Indonesia, that's largely and likely for countries like the Philippines, where you've got a lot of separate islands and a lot of distinct microgrids. It will have a different set of metrics, and resilience will mean two different things, right? Especially when you have no interconnection or very little fallback. So defining those metrics, so therefore the investment can be made. And so defining resilience, defining the metrics and KPIs, and then that can determine where the investment needs to be made. So it's really, that seems to be the most important thing to me. And I think it's a fundamental change in recognizing the importance of electricity. We're not just talking about its core job of keeping the lights on, providing us access to appliances and heating and cooling, HVAC. It's now going to play a fundamental role in transportation, which dramatically increases its importance in the economic and the societal value chain.
Yeah, I think as well, the provision of power very often speaks to people's aspirations. So they're not happy with just a basic service. They want the service that fits in with their aspirations for themselves. And that's sometimes very difficult to define in the abstract. Dr. Arifin, what about from your perspective?
Okay. Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sorry. So, from your perspective, what is the most important consideration for the development of the smart grid roadmap?
Yeah, as mentioned with Mr. Haryanto, yeah, the first thing issue we should solve is the human readiness. So the first thing we should do is how we align the perspective, the mindset, the thinking of smart grid among the stakeholders. We should, align the knowledge among the stakeholder. So even in PLN, for example, internally, I believe not all engineer, not all management in PLN already had sufficient knowledge about the smart grid itself. So we should come to some similar equal understanding about the smart grid first before we discuss more detail about the project, about where will we go. But we should know the basic foundation of smart grid itself, the basic knowledge. What is smart grid actually? What the context of smart grid in our system in Indonesia? What's benefit of smart grid for utility, for the all stakeholder, for customer, for the community, what kind of technology we need it, and what kind of the capability, the business model we should develop. I think this is the first thing we should do, yeah, before we go to the further action. So I think this is the basic action. We should improve the capability of all stakeholders to have the aligned, the similar, the equal knowledge about smart grid. I think this is the first thing we should do.
I think that's a very good point. I guess it's knowing what you're working with before you start defining how you expand it. We've been getting a couple of questions in from the audience, and I am going to ask one, and I think Dr. Irfan, I'm going to ask it to you, and that is, will PLN implement vehicle-to-grid applications to reduce CO2 emissions?
Yeah, actually, yeah, we just start to build the EV charging station for support the e-mobility in our country. And for the EV charging station, actually, join also with the BPPT, for example. We already operate, not so many, but I think it's sufficient for the use case. And for the platform, the digital platform, we actually now already develop such e-mobility, IoT, can connect EV charger between EV charger and between EV charger unit with the EV owner. Yeah, it's already and on the stage. Maybe it's the initial version, but we already had the platform actually. So maybe in this year we want to scale up to connect all the our existing EV charger around Indonesia to be able to connect each other and also connect with the EV owner. But I can say that we are already had the platform, the IoT of e-mobility in Indonesia.
Thank you very much. So, sorry, Mr. Richardson.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add to this. I think vehicle to grid is really, really interesting, but it's really applicable. It almost has a niche in particular markets. If you talk to Europe isn't really interested in vehicle to grid because they don't have a lot of distributed call them home or business-based renewables. Most of their renewable generation is grid scale. But versus a place like Australia, where you've got a high penetration, something like 25, 28% of homes have rooftop solar, where you have that kind of distributed micro generation, consumer-based generation, vehicle to grid makes a lot more sense. It's going to be the same sorts of things in places like Indonesia. Dr. Arifin hit the nail on the head, right? Where you've got distributed generation assets that are small scale. Vehicle to grid makes a lot more sense. But it'll be different by market, and I think you'll see vehicle manufacturers target different capabilities in different markets. So Nissan may sell VTG vehicles in Indonesia and Australia, but they may not be a priority in Europe or North America, as an example.
Yeah, and I suppose especially with Indonesia sort of targeting, what was it, 1 gigawatt of rooftop solar, that certainly is going to change that dynamic within the Indonesian context. Dr. Iskandar, you've obviously, given your role, had a chance to evaluate or have some contact with the concept of vehicle to grid. Do you have any thoughts that you would like to share on that?
Pardon me?
Do you have any thoughts on vehicle to grid and its application for Indonesia?
Vehicle to grid, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Yes, actually, we have the small microgrid in our facilities in Science and Technology Park in Puspitek, Serpong, that has the ability to operate operate it with electric vehicle charging, fast charging station. So these facilities are now in progress, and we have been working together with PLNs, and hopefully the pilot project will be useful for the next fast charging station that will be produced by our counterpart industry, local industry, then of course used by PLN and other companies that operated in Indonesia.
I think that's amazing. So it doesn't matter how small the island is that you're living on, you can still have access to electric vehicles. What a great initiative. While I have the spotlight on you, so perhaps I could ask, what do you see the role of R&D institutions being with regards to PLN strategy or the smart grid in general?
Yes, I work in BPPT for many years. BPPT is an R&D institution in Indonesia. Our function is to assess and apply the new technology, and then doing audit technology before it implemented in our country. So in terms of smart grid and smart microgrid, our office has been working for quite a long time, maybe about 9 to 10 years ago. So, for instance, the Sumba microgrid that mentioned also by Haryanto, initially built by our office, and then we cooperating with PLN in operating this pilot project. R&D institution can be PLN's main partners in promoting smart grid, as my office has been doing right now. So R&D institution is the first to build microgrid project, and this cooperation needs to be continued, considering that my office, for instance, BPPT, has been developing several microgrids in several locations with different objectives, including how to simulate the dynamic pricing, for instance, how to supply the electric vehicle and how to make them more reliable or more a higher quality. So with this experience we have in BPPT, PLN can have the lesson learned to further develop the implementation of microgrid for the other use. Yeah? As I stated before, to several facilities that needs high reliability and high quality of power supply, such as airports and also industrial estate and so on.
Mr. Richardson, perhaps then I could expand on that question a little bit and ask what a company such as yours might bring to the table.
Well, a lot of what we focus on is around at Accenture is focusing on the asset management side of things. So the build out of digital twins, the analytics and the data and analytics around what it means to operate that. Really looking at it from a predictive perspective. So as opposed to focusing on historical meteorological data or even near-term forecast, we really start to shift to a probabilistic model, which is where you're running multiple scenarios, like I said before, concurrent events, and that's really where we focus a lot of time on energy. Is how do we get the monitoring in place to ensure the network is reliable and resilient, compile the data, then be able to run future-looking models and far out future-looking models with a lot of different permutations that then allow us to go back and say, okay, these are the scenarios, this is their probability, and this is the preparations we should potentially take for them. So where we spend a lot of time and energy is on that data and analytics side.
Okay, thank you. I've got another question here, which has come in from somebody in the audience. And Dr. Arifin, I'm going to pose this one to you. And the question is, how would PLN convince the government and their customers of the necessity to start with AMI and other smart grid products when ROI isn't very promising based on earlier rollouts around the region? Secondly, who would fund the commercial rollout? PLN, the government, or the customer?
Yeah, actually for AMI, we already done with the several pilot project in some location around Indonesia, and the best challenging, of course, the investment. On average, if we want to install AMI, not only two-way smart meters, but the system, we need about $60 for each customer. And now PLN has over 70 million customers. So if we want to implement AMI for all our customers, we need about 4,500 million US dollar. It's very huge money. Yeah. So to enter to the commercial state, of course, we should do a selection with the priority location, with the priority place, city. We will have the largest potential for the benefit for the MI. So we already meet with the regulator, the government, actually, the Minister of Energy. Actually, they are very welcome, for the AMI project. And for since two years ago, actually, the Minister of Energy already give some mandatory project to PLN to develop MI soon. But we have some difficulty. The first thing I already explained about the investment, very huge, and other problem with the MI, actually, what the benefit actually will come for the customer. It's still unclear until right now. So we need some, you know, some time, yeah. We need more time, yeah, to prepare the rollout of the MI before we scale up to the commercial. Maybe at for the beginning, at least 1 or 2 million customer. We should to ensure that everything is will be running well about the technology, about the business model. For example, for the MI, because our specific geography, we have several islands and scatter. We have in some cities in Java very dense population, so we need some communication technology. Not only one, yeah, not single solution for all for our needs. That's why we should aware. We should be more, you know, should be more ready before the rollout. We already done the benchmark, yeah, to other country. For roll up the MI, actually we need preparation at least 2 or 3 years before the commercial state. The first step is do POC, proof of concept, to select the communication technology actually which is more suitable with our need based on the Indonesia context, because we cannot, you know, adapt the system coming from US, from Europe, from other country easily to Indonesia. Sometimes it's not working well. So we should do this at the first time. After that, we also thinking about the business model. We already benchmark to India. India has very interesting project. They can develop smart waste meter MI, join with other international lender. Then the cost is very low, only $1.5 for each customer. It's very amazing, very wonderful for us, yeah. So we still do investigation for that, because I think it's also the best solution for us in Indonesia. If in India is can work well, I believe in Indonesia also will do the same good thing, yeah. That's I think the MI project in Indonesia.
Thank you very much. Mr. Richardson, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, this over seeing AMI roll out and just hearing the numbers, right? Yeah, you know, in $150, $160, you know, a couple of years ago, down to 60, and now looking at $1.50. I mean, it's just amazing. It's good to see the exponential curve down that we see in solar and battery and things like that, also being reflected in AMI infrastructure. I don't envy Dr. Harifin or Dr. Iskander the complexities of rolling out in a large geography with so many customers and so many literal islands of grid. I mean, it would be an incredibly challenging construct to try to figure out where and how you do that effectively. But it's amazing, and I like the idea of the fast follower idea behind India. If they're really getting those kind of numbers, then you definitely want to try to jump on that train.
Yeah, absolutely. That does bring me to another question, and I'm actually going to pose it to all of you, and that's really about technology. Is technology the answer to everything? And obviously I use that term very loosely, but perhaps Mr. Richardson, seeing as though I've just started with you, I could ask you to comment on that, and then I'll move on to the other panelists.
So in short, no, there absolutely has to be investment in technology, both infrastructure and in the analytics behind it, and the digital twins that we talked about to support an effective and smoothly operating network and grid. But ultimately, there's a ton of benefit and a great deal of opportunity in engaging with your end consumers and involving them as part of the solution. We talked about the electrification of everything. That also presents a lot of opportunity for people to be part of the solution and not just recipients of decisions made unilaterally and centrally. We've seen in consumers, particularly when they believe they're working for the greater good and the collective good, they will make sacrifices. Claire, you and I had a great conversation earlier talking about day zero in South Africa, right? As water as a proxy. The community, all representative areas of the socioeconomic spectrum took it on themselves to play a role in ensuring that water was conserved and that day zero was pushed out. I think you'll see the same sorts of things if you start to involve those end consumers more effectively and triggering to them. And Dr. Iskander talked about dynamic pricing, rebates, refunds, leveraging their infrastructure, although like a virtual power plant. Those all represent really good opportunities. And some of them have some technology elements and some of them are pretty basic and just asking consumers to turn things off, turn things on, etc.
Dr. Iskander, what's your perspective on the role of technology? I mean, I know technology is your life, so perhaps you're not the right person to be asking this question.
Yes, thank you, Claire. From my perspective, I think that a fully technological approach does not guarantee the success in achieving all the objectives of smart grid. Technology is not the only solution. In fact, all the technology needed to build smart grids is already available. But there are many other factors that determine success, such as financing support, already mentioned and described by Dr. Arifin, and also stakeholder participation. These stakeholders, not only Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, many more of them. I think in the central government itself, there are Minister of Industries, Minister of Trade, Minister of Research and Technology, for instance, and also customer support. As also explained by Dr. Arifin, that if we should put all the AMI to the customer, there need a huge of money to spend. So we have to start with the pilot projects, educate customers, so that the customer will support us. And the most importantly, this is the most important, I think, the ability of strong legal umbrella. The current laws that as the platform or base of our development in electricity, I think is not strong enough as the umbrella for the development of smart grid in Indonesia. So all of these factors are very important in preparing to build smart grids in our country.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Arifin, what about you?
Yes, I totally agree with Dr. Iskander. Yeah, technology is not everything. Yeah, it's not one not all solution for smart grid. Of course, if we look at to the smart grid architecture issued by IEC in 2018, yeah, it looked like the smart grid similar to the system, to the electricity system combined with the ICT network. But if we look at to more detail inside the IEC 2018, is totally not only about technology. It's about the market. It's about the policy. I think we already explained before that. For example, without the dynamic price, that dynamic tariff regulation, I think it's not effective. We do the demand response in our grid system. And also, for example, if we still use the business model like right now in Indonesia, the business model is still rigid, not dynamic. such technology like battery energy storage is not too effective to overcome the opportunity to use the electricity at the low price and trading with the electricity at the higher price, because in our existing model business right now, even though technically we can replace the some power plant, thermal power plant, such as diesel engine, gas fired power plant, with the battery energy storage, combining with such cheap energy resources. But if we look at to the legal contract between PLN as off-taker with the gas-fired power plant, it's not easy. We just want to replace, but we already had the long-term contract. We still have the take or pay clause at the contract. So this also another issue. So not only technology, but the policy, the business model, also the legal issue related to the business model of electricity in Indonesia will be very significant for influence the effectiveness of smart grid implementation.
I think you raise a really important point there around existing contracts and the necessity and I guess your legal obligation to honor those, even if the world has changed significantly since those contracts were originally entered into. Ladies and gentlemen, we have got about 5 minutes left. So I'm actually going to ask our panelists if they could perhaps give us just a closing statement, just some final thoughts on PLN's smart grid strategy. Mr. Richardson, from your perspective, perhaps just again an overarching view from an APAC perspective around smart grids. Dr. Arfin, let's start with you.
Yeah, actually PLN is very open. We are very welcome to you all to develop together the smart grid in Indonesia with the win-win solution, with some equal relationship. Yeah. So because we believe that smart grid actually will overcome our problem in the future, to dealing with the decarbonization, to increase renewable energy, to deal with digitalization, how we utilize some digital technology to make our grid flexible and resilient, more resilient. And also we want to engage to empowering our customer to be not only produce the electricity, but also we very welcome to be our customer able to also produce the electricity to our system. So we are very welcome to you all. Let's do together, yeah, the smart grid implementation in Indonesia, especially in PLN.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Iskandar?
Yes, I think the smart grid issue is very interesting, and I think this will change the architecture of Indonesia electricity system in the future. But I would like to underline that some change in the policy, for instance, will risk the continuity of the smart grid program, because as mentioned before, that smart grid needs investment, it takes a long time, long-term program. So we need very strong legal as umbrella. I think at least is the level of government regulation or law, change of law, because it's very risky if the regulation not strong enough, so that it is not it can be easily, for instance, changed by the change of national leadership. So I think we start from the small thing. We start now, but starting from what we have experienced, as I mentioned before, start from prosumer, start from microgrid, while we educate and assure the government, the parliament to make a review, evaluation for the stronger regulation in Indonesia.
So thank you very much. Mr. Richardson, last but certainly not least.
Yeah, I think I'm going to kind of summarize a little bit of what I've definitely heard from Drs. Konder and Arifin, which is about communication and empowerment, right? The idea that we need to communicate openly and transparently with the regulator, with government, with all facets of the electricity value chain, retail, T&D, and generation, and communicating the value, because as we talked about, this is big. These are massive investments that require a lot of time, a lot of energy, and communicating clearly what the benefits are going to be to everyone, and doing that transparently is really, really critical. And one of the key communication angles that we want to take and we want to emphasize is empowerment, is this idea that whether it's generation, whether it's mobility, whether it's storage, a smart grid enables empowerment among whether it's a business or a consumer. And that's really, really important angle to continue to focus on. So I completely echo all of this stuff. It can, a smart grid rollout can be disrupted very quickly by a change in leadership, by a policy change. And these are big, massive shifts that are very hard to turn around or change directions. So getting it right and communication to all parties and what the benefits going to be is really, really important. And ultimately, I think flowing down into that empowerment angle is how you get all parties on board.
I quite like that. I think that that's going to be my go-to mantra for the moment, and that is smart grid enables empowerment, because I think that it pretty much says it all. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Enlit Asia, PLN, MKI, all of our panelists, I really would like to thank you for being with us today. I'd also like to thank you, our panelists, for your very valuable insights. Thank you to our sessions. Thank you to our session sponsor Accenture, and to PLN for sponsoring this entire series. Just a reminder, the recording for today's webinar will be available on demand via the link that you've used today, and you can access it via either the Enlit Asia or the Smart Energy International websites. Don't forget, Enlit Asia is going to be taking place as a live event in March 2021 in Jakarta. So do visit the website to find out more and make sure that you're there to meet some of the amazing people that have been on this call with us today. So from us, please stay safe and keep well. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks.